So this is designed to actually build a self-reliant ecosystem and do a lot of knowledge sharing and hand-holding. That's really the purpose of AIA and FSM getting involved. Uh, is also on the SMEs. As everybody admits, they are the backbone of the industry, and unless we do for them, the ecosystem will not develop. That is the second part. And the third and most distinguishing part, which I would like to present today, is about not so much technology for the sake of technology, but technology for creating value for our people. And that constitutes value for people on the shop floor, value for people who are sitting in remote and accessing dashboards, and value for the service providers who help us build our systems. And therefore, we believe that COVID has given us a very, very powerful message, and we've come out very, very successful. That is, we converge well when there is danger. The time has come for converging even when the danger passes away. And that convergence amongst people is what is going to make our industry self-reliant. So with that backdrop, I would like to now make a little bit of, presentation. Dr. Jha, can I have my slides? So really speaking, we would like each one of you to, and the basic thing which I'm presenting before the audience is the shop floor should inspire confidence and give clarity to the personnel. And I'm very sure that the presentations today will also address that. So technology for timely human actions and business outcomes is the first value proposition. The next slide. The other one is on remote visibility. Here again, the purpose of connectivity of devices, connectivity of the business system is to get information to the right people who need it. It's not the other way around. I need not be connected to everything. I want to be connected to what impacts my decision making, my area of responsibility. So that is the second aspect when we talk about technology for humans. And as you can see, there are different stakeholders, the machine builder, the software designer, the maintenance personnel. So that's something, again, which will get elaborated progressively in our technology and solutions sessions. The third aspect is when we talk about, next slide, you will hear a lot about smart manufacturing. And I am not going to digress from that topic. But again, I want the audience to link smart manufacturing also from the sense that that too is a technology for humans. And the virtues of smart manufacturing, if we look at it from the human perspective, is A, humans are connected. There are no silos between departments. And people from one department know that there is an impact of information from their side to another department and vice versa. High degree of optimization. So optimization means not only optimizing the resources on materials and energy, etc., but also optimizing the energy of the human. So the automated production with easy to grasp reporting is a simple mantra. Next slide. And then we have three more values, one of transparency. And our belief is that as long as a manufacturer can create transparency for the customer's order tracking, everything else will automatically follow. Proactivity, the ability to have real time sense of safety concerns, of stockout situations, and of machine health. These are again some of the very vital things which are important for humans across all departments. And the last and most important in this age of digitalization and the new world that we are in, flexible, configurable, and adaptable to changed business imperatives and different scenarios. So, with that context, let me now move on to the next part of my session, which is the main presentation. My first speaker is Dr. Ranjit Date. Dr. Ranjit Date is the promoter, the president, and the joint managing director of PARI. We love to call it PARI. It is Precision Automation and Robotics India. PARI is a global leader in manufacturing automation and has a team of over 500 engineers and over 3,000 automated manufacturing solutions deployed around the world. That really is one of the most successful entrepreneurial journeys I have seen in engineering and integrated activity from a Indian person. At PARI, he is responsible for technology and business strategy. Dr. Date received his PhD in systems engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, New York, for his work in robotics and automation. He also holds the master's degree in electrical engineering. He's a gold medalist from the University of Pune and very academic as well. He has authored 12 technical papers and manuscripts for international journals. Dr. Date's professional interests are conceptualizing and developing new technologies and applications for robotic systems, strategies for engineering management, and development of technical skills amongst young engineers and managers. And as I introduce the speaker, I also have a sense of apology to him as well as to the audience that today's interaction you will probably get to hear only 10% of what he has to offer. So with that, welcome Dr. Ranjit Date to this panel discussion, and I look forward to your engaging the audience and giving them value for the time they've spent.
Thank you. Yeah.
So friends, in our previous sessions, several people sought greater clarity on reliable solutions for safe distancing. The question to you, Dr. Date, is there any role for automation, or is it just common sense that needs to be applied? Kindly take the audience through the choices that are available, and especially in the discrete and batch manufacturing arena. Over to you, Dr. Date.
Thank you, Anup. Very kind words. So I hope my talk can do justice to everything that you have said that you expect out of me. And a quick answer to that question, that indeed a lot of the industries around the globe have worked very hard to do a FMEA level of analysis of the risks that are being presented by COVID and how to start the industry safely such that we can manage these risks. As a matter of fact, a lot of the these industries, Ford, for example, has published their playbook for managing manufacturing operations through the after COVID as a free documents, and they're available on the web. If somebody has difficulty in finding them, I'll be happy to help as well. So there's a lot of work and guidance provided by the industry who have put their sharpest minds to work on the problem at hand, because indeed, essentially it is in nobody's interest to have our economy limping and not able to adapt to the challenge that we face, because clearly the solution is not in sight, and we are in this problem for a long haul, and we just can't drag our feet and be where we are. Next, please. Slide, please. So, of course, automation is one of the solutions, although kind of obvious that simply reduce the number of people and automatically distancing will be achieved. It is little more than that, and therefore I'll try to present to you the role of automation and effectively engineered solutions for distancing in the short, medium, and long-term solutions in the post-COVID world. Yes, please. So, as we are geared up for resuming manufacturing operations before the vaccine is available, we just can't wait for the vaccine to be available before resuming our manufacturing operations. It is absolutely high level of challenge to make sure that we manage this risk effectively, such that we are not made to shut down if we start working in a hurry without these risks being controlled. We can once again have spikes of cases, and once again government will have no choice but to start shutting down things again. And the worst situation than a stop situation is a stop and go situation, where costs are being incurred and no revenues are being generated. So indeed, we don't want to do that, and therefore it is extremely important that we essentially learn how to prevent COVID transmission while people are working together. And I'm going to share some of the techniques that we have studied from the various industries who have released these playbooks, as well as our work with them, because a lot of them rely on the equipment manufacturers study and create the risk analysis for their assessment and the work zones, and to see how they can further improve the lines to reduce the exposure to people. And at the high level, these techniques can be classified into either reduce the, and that's the obvious role of automation. And you would have seen a lot of articles starting from New York Times, Wall Street Journal, etc., Forbes, and so on, that essentially industry is recognizing that to continue working through pandemics like this. And I'll tell you an interesting viewpoint that one of our global peers gave me, that is this problem limited to COVID-19? Actually, it is not, because what he said is that, given the level of global integration that we have achieved, where just like a component from one part of the world can travel to the other part of the world within a matter of days, before anybody getting any chance to respond to how to prevent that component from traveling, this collected global economy is by itself a very strong framework for having multiple such pandemics happening. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised that such a thing has not happened before, and it has taken almost about 100 years between the pandemics. So I think industry has become sensitive to the fact that we have been lucky so far, but that does not mean that we are being lucky, and therefore not just limited to COVID-19. The manufacturing operations planning going forward will be pretty strongly geared up towards this possibility of person-to-person exposure in case of COVID, in case of pandemics. Then isolating the working areas of people and expanding areas that enable providing more space and therefore less possibility of person-to-person transmission. So these are the broad techniques that people are using. Next, please. But of course, this is easier said than done, as all of you who have been running manufacturing for so many decades, that presently the lines are not designed for being able to achieve that. For example, very simple rule of 2 meter space between the two operators, right? We have always taken 9 as the golden rule of a station pitch for ergonomic reasons. And, essentially simply expanding this to 2 meters is simply unpractical. I mean, forget about the space availability or not space availability, but simply from the point of view of the level of manual work that will be required to parts over this 2-meter pitch or fast takt time operations and so on. Certainly, everything will require a level of automation that will be required to achieve this kind of a distancing going forward. But even something as simple as that is a challenge. We look at multiple people having to touch the same part repeatedly. Our serial production systems require people to keep on working on the same workpiece. So essentially, for a virus that spreads by touch and leaves the imprint of the on the part, literally from that touch, the next operator is going to get that on his hands and so on. So essentially, how do you prevent the multi-touch surfaces for which manufacturing processes are highly susceptible? Third is, for example, there are a lot of auxiliary processes that essentially keep on happening, like, for example, feeder materials, incoming part cards, QC personnel. That multiple people interaction from time to time, in addition to workmen, is a part of the manufacturing process. And now, how do you eliminate those interactions, or at least make those interactions happen from a 2-meter distance, right? That's another challenge. Finally, of course, as you know from the tried and tested techniques like Gemba, be where the action is, and all of us were trained from our right from our manufacturing engineering studies that be where the action is. You have to physically be on the line to actually understand the opportunities and challenges of manufacturing to be able to either improve or solve a problem, right? So essentially, for our supervisors, our managers, our line leaders, how to manage this process without, once again, keeping on coming to the floor and interacting with people. That's another challenge. So the challenge of safe operations in manufacturing by limiting this transmission is not easy without a deep thought and matching actions. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So we have been working with our global customers in 3 ways. And of course, these are 3 levels of work. One is, of course, everybody has to have a solution. Less than 1 month, they need to be able to at least start in limp mode. It is not possible that everything will start at 100% efficiency in this time, but nonetheless, not having to start it at all is not acceptable at all. So typically working with 30 to 50% of the manpower that enable distancing automatically, and yet have 20 to 40% of the capacity producing within 1 month is the typical goal that people have started opening up their manufacturing lines in. And we help them, and I'll give you some examples as to how this is being done. In the near term, which is basically even before this financial year ends, we would basically like to make sure that we are running at least a few months in this year at near 100% capacity, but yet keeping the same distancing possible. So how do we work with 50% of the manpower with nearly 100% capacity? And in long term, the strategic view that essentially how do we sustain this with a reduced level of manpower, but achieve actually a capacity advantage by achieving 100% or more capacity by actually utilizing the benefit of the and remote monitoring and so on, and actually be a vibrant manufacturing organization that is sustainable with robustness against pandemics and robustness against the such issues happening again from next flu season or one more wave next year, not take us down again, right? That's the ultimate goal that everybody is trying to work towards. Next, please. So in terms of the immediate solutions, for example, working with, and I have a few slides with a few example layouts explain by examples what each of these points physically mean. But typically the workforce reduction without actually major change in the existing processes requires operator sharing. That basically means that, earlier at the regular required TAC done by say 2 or 3 operators is now being managed by a single operator, and therefore clearly there will be a reduction in the throughput expected, but essentially that enables the bridge time in a limp mode to enable ramp up and do the other implementation before actually starting to incur the risk of not having taken these precautions and then therefore having flare-ups and lockdowns. So wherever possible to relay out the present process, because otherwise simply in the present layout, if you have one person do the work of 3 people, then essentially simply the walks required back and forth are going to result in a fair amount of inefficiency, and therefore it will be further inefficiency over and above short stuffing of simply the work balance, and therefore relayouting wherever it's possible. And of course, some of the barriers, PPs and sanitizing protocols that ensure things like, for example, whenever there is a multi-touch of a surface possible as a result of the assembly operations, people will have to work with PPs like hand gloves. They'll have to have the face shields such that they don't end up touching their own face by even with the glove, because finally glove is not a protection for somebody touching his own face with the infected glove and once again getting infected and so on. So some of these techniques can be simply pulled out from the playbooks that the global manufacturing industries have published as a free resource for people to simply follow. Next, please. In the near-term solution, some of the interesting technological additions can add. So lowest hanging fruit actually is the automation of the material handling operations. Traditionally, material handling, whether it is bulk material handling or load unload, pick and place, these have been the lowest hanging opportunities that have always existed in manufacturing. Globally, people have automated this in any high volume application already. In India, that is not yet prevalent, obviously driven more or less by the cost economics of the people cost versus the cost of an automatic equipment. But the lowest now happen to be the loading and unloading of the machines, the robotic palletizing and depalletizing for the bulk of the materials for the line feeds, as well as the conveyorized or AGV based line-to-line transfers like trolley and carts feeding of the parts, supply to the lines, point of use storage, and so on. These are highly low-hanging opportunities that can be implemented reasonably simply, reasonably fast, and at a relatively low cost. I mean, these are something that many of our customers in India are already utilizing, have been utilizing, and I think the present situation is only going to accelerate that, and that's the need of the 3 to 6 months time frame. Next, please. Next slide, please. When we
Dr. Date, just a pause. May I request Mr. Jirge to switch off his video?
Switch off.
Yes, because I'll conserve the bandwidth. We are having some networking issues. Your audio and video you can switch off right now. The control will be on the bottom right side.
Just on the bottom right side.
there is a strip of 3 icons. The second icon is the video.
Dr. Date, you could resume. Thank you.
Sure. So the second type of solutions that will work in the present situation, and so essentially, obviously, when you're using one person to do more than one person's work, he needs to be enabled with as much semi-automation as possible to increase his efficiency, such that finally you can get to close to 100% of your capacity. And once again, all these applications have a use not just in improving the efficiency, but also in quality. For example, the inspection, gauging, and QC tools for vision systems, auto gauging, and auto test systems is something that many of my customers are the first adopters, that they don't want people to keep on manually checking something with verniers and so on anymore. They will use auto gauging, and then essentially the QC is reduced now to a material handling job, how to load and unload that gauge. So it has, apart from the efficiency benefits, the quality benefits as well. Then use of the automation tools like part feeders, systems, slides and assists that enable the movement of the operator the least. So the part is being made available to him for just doing the value adding job as opposed to moving the parts around. So for example, the feeder racks are free flow racks that prevents people to walk and spend their time in just carrying the material around. Cobots that enable the robots to work side by side with operators and do a good part of the man's non-value adding job by like for example tool handling or positioning by in an assisted manner. So technologies can be used in side by side with the people and basically enable one person to do a job of two people. These are the typical techniques now that the lines are being redesigned with to enable two purposes, of course. I would say three purposes. One purpose, of course, is the distancing, but the second and third purposes are actually you're making your manufacturing operation more efficient and with a better quality control and process control. And of course, any of the tools that are manual can be automated simply at the tool level, like power tools and assists and grippers, etc., that reduce the workers' manual activity in a particular task. Yeah, next please. And finally, I think this is an area that a lot of development is happening by remote monitoring of the line through the data and data analytics. First, finding out what's happening on the line at all times without actually having to physically be there on the line. And then the next level of data analytics systems to give a deeper understanding of the issues and opportunities beyond simply an end-on system, which has been a typical way that industry saw the data today. A much deeper data analysis based visibility of the manufacturing operations are possible through remote monitoring and IoT based systems. Next please. If you get to a 6 to 12 months of time frame, that now is your re-engineering of the lines for our life for tomorrow, then we basically are looking at driving this efficiency to its maximum in terms of human usage, minimizing the human usage, but at the same time maximizing the capacity. So the automated lines, semi-automated processes, fully automated quality control, and full IoT implementation that integrates all these station-based solutions that ensures that with very number of people, the entire line is running productions for you, delivering all the goals like flexibility, quality, just in time, and so on, with very little use of manpower. And that's the long-term solution that enables us to be ready for the emerging opportunity that and I'll talk a little bit about the opportunity dimension of the COVID-19 as well. It is not all bad news. If we prepare ourselves well, it is a good news in the near future as well. Next slide, please. So I'll give you some examples with a representative block diagrams. So for example, if you looked at our conventional machining or stamping unit processes, typically we would have a row of operations with people manning each of these with possibly bin feeds or component feeds on their left side. And typically we would have kept a 1.5 meter or so of pitch between them However, when people are able to interact with each other, they are actually able to come as close to each other as 2 feet or about 0.6 meters. And this is a not a good situation from the point of view of repeated exposure to each other. And therefore, the first thing that people have started doing is basically, if it is possible, simply distance. But typically, it is not possible that your factory expanded 2 times the space and just space these operations out to a 2-meter pitch. So essentially, people have started working with creating buffer zone between people. And if the relayouting of the equipment to higher space is not possible, then have a single person man multiple stations. So although it means a drop in, still there is a basically the risk control of making sure that the transmission risk from the virus is eliminated. Next, please. Then, of course, this line in the near or long term has the potential of being fully automated through a gantry or robotic type of loaders, auto quality control systems, and IoT systems, the industrial Internet of Things systems that provide the data visibility and optimization opportunities that I'll be talking about a little bit on one of the slides. Next, please. Take a typical line assembly kind of a situation where you have a conveyorized line with moving a part moving between stations. And over here, the problem is more acute because typically the assembly lines are structured with a 0.9 feet pitch between the stations, and feeder racks for the incoming parts on the opposite side. This is a typical layout of an assembly lines that people would have conventionally been using. And of course, the immediate requirement of this is to have multiple stations manned by people to generate a 2-meter space, and also acrylic barriers and sanitizing stations between the zones, because over here the 2 people having to walk close together when they are working on the nearby stations simply cannot be eliminated, and yet having barriers between each of the stations simply does not allow people to do their work at all because it is too restricting. So enabling multiple station work to be combined with a buffer zone and barriers is one of the ways that people are overcoming this situation in the immediate future, the tomorrow situation. Next, please. However, in the near and long term horizon, basically having manual stations assisted with auto tooling or assists, that one person is able to do a job of 2 stations actually without losing productivity. Separating multiple stations on the line wherever possible through auto stations that automatically generates a distance required between the operators, and AGV type of feeders instead of the part feeds that require once again manual interaction with other people, to enable that portion to be automated, reducing further exposure to people to each other and interactions. And finally, once again, IoT system with remote monitoring that enables the supervisory and managerial people not to actually have to interact on a very regular basis on the people with the line. Next, please. So if we do this right, the 2 sources of opportunities that are emerging, and you can actually read this pretty much every day from the media in the business magazines, that the US, EU and Japan have already announced policies to move the production out of China. They not only fear that this thing can recur out of China, but essentially as a result of the experience or the feeling that China has not been transparent, and therefore essentially what could be going on that will not be in their control, everybody has become really, really skeptical. As a matter of fact, these governments have announced funds to say that we will give you subsidies for your capital expenditure if you are moving the manufacturing out of China into either home countries or other countries in Asia. Okay? And that obviously underscores India as a big opportunity. Secondly, if you chains, the previous pattern that world normally worked on was 70% China, because obvious cost and volume advantages that China provided, 20% in other low-cost regions or low-cost areas, and 10% generally where the plant is as a local backup supply. Now that actually is being rethought, and all our worldwide large customers are telling us that they will not rely on more than 40%. They are already doing the necessary actions to move the lines and the manufacturing out of China, and they will limit it to not more than 40% in China, and the other 40% go to the other low-cost areas. And once again, India has got the potential to be the largest beneficiary from that. And if you simply look at 20% going up to 40%, that essentially is a 100% jump by simply this step of supply chain realignment globally as well, right? The right preparedness to run the manufacturing safely, as long as we don't get into this start-stop condition where we are not able to reliably supply to the rest of the world the committed and guaranteed deliverables, then essentially we will stand to gain in this present situation when we gear up for being able to do manufacturing safely in India. And therefore, essentially, India literally can double its business in the next 2 years. 1 year, of course, the ramp up for getting prepared, but in the next year, we certainly can be a big player in the manufacturing. And the type of solutions that I presented are really gearing us up for those. Next, please. Last but not the least, I think this is a technology, IIoT is a technology that we are about, because just by giving you a couple of examples of what we have been able to do, about 2 years ago, Pari, my company Pari, actually created a division specializing in this IIoT solution, because it's a fairly highly specialized area with machine learning and all that. So essentially, Linecraft AI is our division that generates a expertise for the IIoT based data analytics for improving the manufacturing optimization. And by now we have deployed about 5 large scale IIoT systems for our customers globally, like Ford and PSA and so on. And in each of their installations, they have been able to achieve 7 to 12% direct productivity benefit towards what was actually being delivered before, without availability of this data and the database analytics and insights that the Linecraft solution provided. And in addition, of course, in the context of the present presentation, the sustenance of the performance due to the real-time and remote visibility, that in case any trend is adverse or anything else that requires somebody's attention before things go bad, people are able to respond much quicker. And therefore, at all these 4 levels that are expected from a solution, the first one being descriptive, that simply achieves the remote monitoring ability to remotely monitor and make the data of everything that is visible, that is happening on the line, visible remotely. But the next one is diagnostics, to make sense out of this, to identify issues and opportunities. And the next one, even at a higher level, to provide solutions or direct opportunities, that if you do this, you will actually get more productivity. And finally, the last level of the capability is predictive, that you can actually prevent issues or degradations of your line by actually predicting and preventing the degradation of the system. So all these 4 levels of objectives can be delivered through IIoT implementations, and this is something that we are launching soon in India as well. So far, we have been working only with our global customers, but very soon we'll be launching this in India as well. And this is something that is available as one of the ways by which the managers and supervisors can work with these lines remotely and still keep on optimizing them to the world-class levels. That was my last slide. The opportunity to, and at the end of the session, I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. Back to you, Sunil. Anup, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Date. And I think you've left the audience with a very powerful message, which is really that, by 2022, many of us have the opportunity to raise our head high and, increase not only our own profitability, but also add to the country's share in exports. So what we will do right now is take an audience poll, and we'd like to take your feedback as to what really is your vision and what is your self-belief. How much do you think you're going to reset your lines? What works for you? Let's get a sense of the feedback from the audience. Can we have the poll, Dr. Jha? So the poll question is, the solution that will satisfy your business need, you have to answer one of these choices. A, activate 20 to 40% capacity within a month with reduced manpower, or to achieve 80 to 90% capacity with reduced manpower, or to invest in automated lines, achieving more than 100% capacity but with reduced manpower. So what you got to answer is, will satisfy your business need, A, B, or C? I know you have to think, so we'll give you a little more time. So we've had 2/3 of the audience already voted, but because it's a close poll, I think we will wait for others to also give their opinion. Another 30 seconds and then we will close the poll. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and the results are there for the audience to see. So there is a clear 50% wanting to go almost to their rated capacity in a relatively smaller time frame, 6 months, and being able to operate with 25 to 50% reduction in manpower. And the balance is almost split. So There are people who are only looking at the short term and saying, can I get restarted within a month? And I'm happy with 20 to 40% with 30% manpower, and then we'll see. And another equally strong vote, 25% is, or 28% is saying they're willing to invest in automated lines and go beyond their rated capacity. So I'm going to park this result, and at this point, I am going to invite my second guest, Professor Sunil Jha. Let me introduce Professor Jha. Professor Sunil Jha teaches at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. He did his PhD in manufacturing science from IIT Kanpur, and he has been engaged in teaching and research on manufacturing processes, computer-aided manufacturing and industrial automation since a decade. He has developed new unconventional super finishing processes and has filed 6 patents, and few of them have already been commercialized. Before joining IIT Delhi, he worked with Tata Motors, Jamshedpur in the area of CAD/CAM and was engaged closely in the digitization of engine components and foundry tooling development. Currently, in the capacity as director of the IITD AIA Foundation for Smart Manufacturing, Dr. Jha is closely supporting the manufacturing industry in absorbing new technologies to make them ready for the next industrial revolution. And that is the reason why he's on our panel today. Welcome, Dr. Jha, to this show, and always a pleasure to create new things with you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, all.
So, Dr. Jha, you have seen the poll result, and there are people sitting on the extremes. 50% are divided. Some of them are wanting to just get on with the post-COVID and then take things from there. What is your advice to them?
Yeah, good afternoon. It's really nice to hear Dr. Date. I just want to start with that. It's a normal phenomena that we always think about health when we fall ill, and later we realize that there are certain good practices to remain healthy. So I think that's what we keep talking about smart manufacturing since long. And then I think we all see now this pandemic as an opportunity for all of us to think in that direction. I think what Dr. Date has given you in a quick overview, I think he's very much optimistic in taking the timelines so that you will be able to connect immediately what is required right now. And that is what is reflecting in the poll also. So idea is that he just suggested the means that you can ramp up your facility, which we all understood is a more traditional today, and then direction is towards achieving the smart manufacturing in at least a year, what he has mentioned, but I still see it's in a too optimistic goal. But not even 1 year, we can even think through for these 3 steps, what he advised, what steps we can take immediately, what could be done in the near term, and what would be the long term for my organization, my factory to become a smart manufacturing facility. I think this is what we all see is the right time to do experiments with the smart manufacturing technologies. And that's how we all are assembled over here. We keep listening, what are the new ways to do that. And that is what we are also communicating. It's not that you have to start everything from day one. And that is what Dr. Date's lecture is also about, what can be done immediately so that you can start your facility. So whatever minimal technology interventions we can do today, that will enable me to at least start my production facility and slowly think towards the long-term implementation of smart manufacturing. I think that is the message keep coming again and again, and we all discussing toward that, what are those key technologies can be helping you to start this activity. And he has already touched upon that. Certainly, we look forward for automation of material handling at certain stage, because today we are more dependent on people to move the material in the facility. So may not be cobot today, but certainly we look forward for some low cost mechanisms or the arrangements which will help me in implementing a little bit on the material handling automation, so that, because today's need is to keep a distance among the people and then let's not touch the stuff again and again. So even the small linkages and mechanisms can help us in achieving those basic automation of material handling. So idea is that not to target immediately for the cobots or the robots or AGV, but certainly in the long term you can plan for those things. So when we talk about 3-stage implementation of these smart manufacturing, we always see that in the long term, maybe you can think through that for after a year or so, you will be planning for that. So we can start within a small steps. That is what the immediate need. And I think it's a right opportunity and then good time we have to think about modernizing our facility. That is what the message from Prime Minister also, he wants us to be self-reliant. And we keep talking about increase of our GDP contribution of the manufacturing 25%. But that's not happening. I think this pandemic is giving us an opportunity to understand that importance of manufacturing and then put our steps and take small steps to realize this smart manufacturing implementation over a period of a year or year and a half, whatever goal you can fix for your plant. I think that's what my take on this. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Jha, for your wise words and guidance. And I'm sure, if I do the poll again, it's going to show a slight shift in thinking. Okay, now we have our second and our final speaker for the day, Mr. Bipin Jirge. Mr. Bipin Jirge is currently the Managing Director of IFM Electronics. Can we have his profile? Yes. Bipin Jirge is a mechanical engineer from Walchand College of Engineering. He did his master's in automotive engineering from VJTI Mumbai. And pursuing his technical passion, Mr. Jirge completed his diploma engineering from the design engineering and factory automation from Technical University Berlin in 1991. In 1992, he came back to India as resident engineer for IFM Electronic company originating from Essen in Germany. In 1995, he founded their Indian operation as a 100% subsidiary at Kolhapur, and currently as managing director of IFM Electronics and responsible for building the team with branch offices all over India, serving and very interesting end user industries: steel, automotive, cement, machine tool, food and beverage, printing and packaging, and earth moving industries. Welcome, Mr. Jirge, to this webinar. I know you have a very deep sense of ground realities, and you will be able to take the audience through to the second and most interesting aspect of the observations we had in the initial seminars, which was that in the new normal, everybody is going to be working with reduced people in the factory. And therefore, there will be a need for people to connect remotely. And that is the topic which we have requested you to speak on, the remote visibility for smart machines. Can you take us through the different, I would say, solutions in terms of affordability and also the ease of implementation, in particularly by the SMEs? Mr. Jirge, over to you.
Thank you very much. It has been a great opportunity to listen to the two experts, Dr. Date and Dr. Jha. I also learned quite a bit of things in their presentations. Thank you very much for this kind of knowledge addition. Basically, what has been talked very elaborately, that in a nutshell, we want to have more production in less manpower and be more productive also. See, Dr. Date mentioned very innovative and very detailed presentation on more automation for material handling, so that every man hour utilized is more productive in the factory. And he has very elaborately explained this, the schematics. Secondly, if you want to have more production, there is another factor, that the downtime has to be minimum. Ideally zero, but it's a tall order to get a zero downtime. Everybody talks about OE nowadays, and OE constitutes few factors. One of the very important factor is availability of the machine. That means the machine downtime should be very minimum, be it almost any industry. So here, a very typical aspect of, say, kind of predictive maintenance. So, may I have next slide, please? Hello? Yeah. In the shop floor, typically we come across various kinds of machines. Some may be a very simple machine, that a motor driving a blower, and a very complex machine like a giant press, pressing out a door of an automotive. Yeah. My presentation is a bit simple, but down to earth, talking about the real implementation. We all talk about more automation, more availability of the machine, but we need to know, where do I start? Yeah. Particularly for SMEs and MSMEs, big companies are already knowing many of the things or most of the things, but especially for small companies, there's a big question mark, where do I start? So I start from this very simple picture of simple machines and complex machines. So if you see the life of a machine, may I have a next slide, please? Yeah, if you see a typical life of a machine, you install the machine on a shop floor, and after some time, maybe weeks and a month, we do various tryouts, do the machine, set the fixtures, and start the job number one. That's a production day one with a real line production. And the machine typically lasts, say, 10 years, 20 years, sometimes bigger machines, 30 years. And during this lifetime, there are a lot of wear and tear of the machine parts, which we do in the form of a maintenance. And at the end of the life of the machine, the maintenance becomes so high that it's economical to buy a new machine with a better technology and, start with a new machine. That's the usual cycle. Can be 10 years, can be 30 years. And there are many types of maintenances, preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance, those kind of things. So in this kind of machine life, we would like to see how to get the maximum uptime from our machines and increase the overall productivity of the whole production line. Yeah, basically to get more OE. And there are things which you can feel and touch, but to get the real feel of when the machine is going to be down is the crux of the predictive maintenance. May I have the next slide, please? See, the simplest way to know when my machine is going to be having some trouble is to have some kind of monitoring. Yeah? A typical example, if we measure the temperature of a running motor, it should not go beyond a certain temperature, maybe 70 degrees. If it's a cassette motor, maybe 100 or 120 degrees. The simplest measure to take the monitoring so that the motor doesn't burn out and I don't have a downtime which is not planned. Generally what we do in a routine maintenance, preventive maintenance kind of thing, we take the motor temperature say every week. Depends on the duty of the motor, but that's what we do. Preventive maintenance. Secondly, we change the bearing of the motor say every year, something like that. Yeah? So that's the kind of thing we do. Now, if we do preventive maintenance and time-based maintenances, we incur certain costs. Cost of the downtime, cost of the labor, irrespective almost of the duty cycle of the machine or the motor. The concept is here to do a predictive maintenance by monitoring the certain key parameters of that machine or machine element, that too in a remote way. Why remote way? Because you need not have a person to visit and go to the machine itself to do the job of measuring the parameter, the key parameter. So we have say a couple of types of remote monitoring concept, and the simplest machine remote monitoring is done by a simple device, be it a temperature sensor or a pressure sensor or something like that, and some kind of display. So this display is typically on the machine locally, and then you see what is the temperature of the motor. Yeah, and that has to be done periodically. Basically, you do it every week or whatever, and then somebody notes the temperature in a book or in an Excel sheet. That's the simplest way. The second thing is, if you have a slightly better kind of say system on the machine, there is a closed loop. That means you monitor certain pressure, you show the pressure to the machine operator, and then there is a PLC or some kind of say controls on the machine which takes the corrective action to bring the parameter back to the safe limits. So this is a kind of closed loop we generally have in many machines. Can I have the next slide, please? So these are the types of maintenances we already talked: breakdown maintenance, preventive and predictive. In a typical predictive maintenance, what we should be able to do is to have a trend monitoring of the key machine parameters which are pertaining to that particular machine, and we should be able to visualize in some format the trend of the critical parameter to be monitored. That means if you have a motor running on a shop floor, we should be able to monitor the motor temperature, for example, and we should be able to see how the temperature has been varying over the time, maybe for 1 week, maybe for 2 weeks. And this trend gives us some kind of very simple analysis that my motor temperature, due to some, say, effect from the operating conditions or the parameters of the machine, is changing, be it increasing or be it decreasing. Yeah? This particular machine parameter gives us some indication of something going in the wrong direction. And if it has not yet gone to the level where the machine control itself will switch off the machine because the temperature is too high, for example, if we can see this trend and predict the, say, rate of rise of temperature, for example, then we are very sure and calculate also that in certain amount of time, that means in maybe in 5 days or 6 days or 8 days, this temperature will increase or cross beyond a certain level which is allowed for that motor. If we know the trend now that the temperature is going to be beyond a certain limit after so many days, the biggest advantage what we have earned is we have access or we have the time to react. It's all about time to react, and in that time we can plan a spare part order for the bearing, for example, check the availability, plan the manpower for the maintenance of that particular motor, and also reschedule the production maybe, because we know that within 8 days the motor has to be maintained, there will be a shutdown for 3 hours. So we gain a timeline so that in that timeline we can do so many planned things so that my production doesn't hamper over a week, for example. Yeah? This is all about getting the signal and the analytics from the system so that we gain advance warning that something is going to happen, that my production will be down or my quality will be getting affected, for example. That's also an unproductive thing. So this trend monitoring is the crux of the matter for, say, getting the predictive analysis done. And we have done some study across the world. May I have the next slide, please? We have done some analysis across the range of machines that the analysis shows that 45% of the machine downtime can be monitored or by monitoring just two parameters on the machine, yeah? Vibration and temperature. I think many of you people who are in the audience, particularly in the plant floor, already know this. Yeah? May not be knowing the exact figure, but this is a rough judgment. Yeah? And this is a worldwide, say, average. So if we monitor a vibration, be it a vibration pattern or amplitude or acceleration, whatever, some form of vibration, which depends on the application, and some form of temperature, then we will be able to predict 45% of our machine downtime can be predicted. That means we can have an advance warning about the machine downtime by just monitoring these two parameters. There are many other parameters also, like pressures in various hydraulic systems, flow of fluids, that means the lubrication flows. For example, if the oil flow to the lubrication line stops or reduces, we will have a breakdown. That many of us know. Levels of various fluids and positions also. If something getting worn out, and if something on the machine position changes beyond a certain level, we are going to have issues on the machine which will result into the breakdown. Now, all these parameters help us to predict the availability of the machine or downtime of the machine. And we have done a study across the manufacturing say lines, and there are mainly 4 types of the machines we come across the world in a manufacturing sector. These are typically turning machines, milling machines, honing machines, and grinding machines. There are many other types of machines in the manufacturing, but these are 4 types, out of which we have made a study. May I have the next slide, please? A study of, say, a turning machine. These are typical parameters to be monitored on typical turning machines, and there are reasons noted here why these parameters are to be monitored. It's very interesting because these are some of the very simple things what we can do. Nowadays, every turning machine, almost every, has a hydraulic power pack on it. If we monitor the system pressure of the power pack, you generally know the health of the power pack, you generally know the leakages happening inside, and you also can know that various clamps and chucks are operating optimally or not. If there is a leakage, this pressure comes down, for example. Secondly, these are the various same parameters. You see, cutting oil and coolant pressure. If we monitor coolant pressures, then basically you know the filter clogging. Coolant does the job of lubrication and heat removal of the workpiece, but if the coolant pressure and the flow reduces, then we have problems. So it can also indicate to filter clogging. Then we can look at the filter. Yeah. So if we monitor similarly cutting oil and coolant temperature flow also, it actually typically tells us what's not correct, and we have observed that if the coolant flow is less, the workpiece warms up because you don't carry away the heat away from the workpiece, and then our dimensional stability gets disturbed. That's a quality parameter which changes. So something similarly, if you see a spindle temperature, a simple temperature sensor on the spindle gives us an early warning of maybe bearing damage in the spindle or loss of lubrication also. Somebody has to see the lubrication of the spindle bearings. Very similarly, spindle vibrations. Yeah? If there is an imbalance on the machine spindle, it affects the whole operation. Many times we also get chatter marks on our workpiece, and that's a quality issue at many surfaces if the vibration in the spindle goes beyond a limit. So these are some very simple low-hanging fruits which we can monitor, and the trend of these parameters will show us that we can really predict something wrong going to be happening in the machine after a certain timeline. And in that timeline, we have to react and correct the thing so that, we get higher availability of the machine, less downtime. May I have the next slide, please? Now the question comes, how do you monitor these things? These are some of the pictures of the devices which can be mounted very easily on the machine. It's a simple vibration sensor, a very simple temperature sensor, pressure, level, and position. Position sensor can be a simple proximity switch, absolutely no problem. Flow switch or flow sensor can be used to monitor the flow of the lubricant or flow of the coolant oil, something like this. Yeah? So these are the kinds of devices which can be used on the machine to monitor the critical parameters. Next slide, please. May I have the next slide?
Yeah, it's already there.
Oh, I'm not seeing the next slide.
It's the one with
Because I still
local indicator.
one. Correct. I'm not able to see this. Now it is there. Some bandwidth problem maybe. Yeah. See, now once we decide where do I start? Yeah. Once we decide that something must be done to get the feedback of the critical machine parameters, the first question is, especially for small companies, where do I start? Yeah? And this can be, you can name it a bit differently if you want. We call it as a level 1. The skill level to implement is you need to have a technician or an electrician. And you can do this kind of simple things in a day, not a problem. What you can do is you can install these kind of devices on those pipes or lines or machine aggregates, and either the sensor has its own indicator or a certain external indicator. And at a set point, it will just drive me a tower light of the machine. That something goes wrong, some indication. It can be a tower light, it can be any lamp, a simple lamp. So if my temperature of the motor goes beyond, say, 55 degrees, there is a lamp glowing on top of that machine, so that I go and correct it. And this can be done. The set point of this temperature can be lower than the temperature at which I really need to switch off the machine. So I get tired. If my motor specification says at 100 degree you have to switch off the motor, I set the set point of the temperature sensor at, say, 75 or 80 degrees. So at 80 degrees centigrade, I get a warning, I get a time to react. I still can run the machine and the motor, for example, till it goes 100 degrees. But in the meantime, I will organize the shutdown, I will organize the spare capacity for that machine, I will organize the manpower to take care of the maintenance of the motor. So this is the first level or the first step which many of us can do very easily in a day's time for a couple of devices. Yeah. Then there is a second level. May I have the next slide, please? The second level is, where you need to have certain, say, a PLC engineer and a technician to install the machine, the devices. In this level, you have a local indicator of the parameter, you have a device installed on the machine, you have a local parameter on the device itself or in the HMI of the machine, and you connect this device to the PLC. Okay, and this PLC does some action and it corrects it doesn't allow the machine to go beyond the allowed, say, operating limit of that particular parameter. That means the temperature sensor, the old simple example what we are talking about, if the temperature is crossing, if my limit of the temperature is say 100 degree for that motor, I raise an alarm at 75 degrees, and in this level at 100 degree the PLC will show me on my HMI that it's 100 degree, and the PLC will switch off the machine. It will not allow the machine to run beyond 100 degree because that's the motor specification. So this is a kind of closed loop which can be incorporated in the machine so that the breakdown doesn't happen. You react in time, and then otherwise it can also be used to slow down the machine, yeah, or to give some warning. And again we get the time to react, that before something really happens which results into the breakdown and the downtime, we can have we can have an action plan for that. The third level is, can I have the next slide, please, sir? The third level is going in the direction of Industry 4 and data analytics, what Dr. Date very nicely explained. This level actually needs a lot more skilled manpower on the shop floor. You need to have PLC skilled engineers and the IT personnel. The timeline to implement these kind of things may be a couple of weeks or even a month. What does one do in this level 3 is, these devices are anyway connected to the machine PLC, and these devices are connected to some kind of IO-Link master. Few of you have heard this technology. It's a kind of PLC remote IO card which gives data in real time to two equipments. One equipment is the machine PLC itself to operate the machine, and second, it gives the data in real time online to an IT server also. And here, various machine parameters can be monitored in real time, and this predictive analysis or data analysis is usually done in an IT domain. That is, the server does this because server is also getting the data from this IO-Link master. This IO-Link master is nothing but a PLC remote IO card, which is getting the real-time data of various machine parameters from the devices what we have seen earlier, be it a vibration, temperature, pressure, and whatnot. So, on one way, you have the signals and the parameter values going to the machine PLC. Parallelly, at the same time, you send these values to the IT server. So the IT server is having the software and the data analytics that tells us, and it can tell us a lot more than that, that this machine, this aggregate is going to have this problem probably or most probably in so many days. And this is the IT systems nowadays are capable of handling that. This planned shutdown needs to be done. This is a manpower to be allocated. This is a spare part to be ordered. All these things happen in the back end in the IT systems. This is more in the direction of Industry 4 kind of things. Many of you have already heard about this Industry 4th revolution of the industry. So this third level goes into that kind of direction. Typical layout looks like that. May I have the next slide, please? Yeah, on the left side, you see the devices connected to these orange boxes. These are PLC remote IOs. The devices are mounted on the machine, and these remote PLC IOs give the same data on the left side to the machine PLC, on the right side to the IT domain or a server. So this is a general, very general schematic. The difference between a normal, analog sensor and an IO-Link system-based sensor is IO-Link based sensor communicates directly with the IT system. It need not communicate to the PLC, but it can communicate both concurrently. So the sensor gives data to the remote PLC IO, and which is called IO-Link master. This IO-Link master sends the same data to the machine PLC as well as say IT. And this is a trend which is going into the future direction. What we suggest to the small say machine users is, if we can equip your machines with some devices with this kind of IO-Link technology already, they may not be using this technology on the day one or in the 2 months time. But if the device is capable of talking on this protocol, they can just keep on add on and upgrading in a step-by-step manner in the direction of higher level of say machine monitoring. So choose the sensor with this kind of IO-Link technology and you upgrade step by step. One of the typical example what we have done again for a simple lathe is on the last slide. So may I have the next slide, please? So this is my last slide. This is a basic machine tool monitoring. You have a spindle, and on that spindle you mount a vibration sensor and a temperature sensor. And if the sensor is not capable of talking this digital language of IO-Link, you get a kind of converter. And there are pressure sensors mounted on the hydraulic power pack. There may be a spindle power sensor somewhere mounted in the control panel. All these signals come to a kind of PLC remote IO called IO-Link master. And this IO-Link master goes to the machine PLC as well as a PC or a server. That server typically runs a database, and this database is used by the big data analytics systems to analyze the data. And the whole small schematic actually is a small start in a big goal of getting as much availability of the machine as possible. Yeah, 100% is with tall order, but if we can get in real sense OE of say anything about 65-70% OE, that means downtime is one part of it, but overall OE, that will be a great time for us in a manufacturing industry. I read somewhere that huge automotive companies like Toyota, they have OE something around 65%. Yeah? So in that OE, machine availability is one pillar. If we can get a machine availability of say 90-95%, then it will be a good success for all of us. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share ideas. My presentation is finished. If you have some questions, let us learn together. I will try my best. Thank you. Thank you, Adolfo.
Thank you, Mr. Jirge. And I think you've really taken a nice class, a master class, how to go about this concept from simple to medium and then into the advanced. Now we'll have a very quick feedback from the audience. We'll start our poll number 2, where we are going to ask the question about the competencies available at your end to implement remote monitoring. So there are 4 options you have this time, 3 related to your in-house skills and 1 related in case you're outsourcing the engineering, PLC and the IT skills. And in a way, this poll is also designed to respond to 2-3 questions which we had around IIoT and how we plan to sort of respond to the industry requirements. Is India ready for this? We had a question from Yogesh Inamdar. We also had a question from Krishna Ragothaman from Aditya Birla, that how to take IIoT to the industries and at what level. The Foundation for Smart Manufacturing is a joint venture between AIA and IIT Delhi to address these specific concerns. And so this poll also helps us in understanding, where different users are. And then I'm going to invite our expert, Dr. Jha, to also respond. I thought this should be an easy answer. You already know what you have in-house. So it is about your present status. Do you have in-house technicians, in-house electricians? Then that is all what you have, then the first response. If you have them and engineers with PLC skills, then your second response. And if you also have IT skills, your third response. If you don't have them and you're outsourcing, then your fourth response. We'll take it for another 30 seconds because I think some trends are emerging clearly. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. And the results are in front of you. So it does look like the majority of you do have the skills in-house with engineers to be able to handle the PLC side and also people to handle the IT side. Now that's a fairly positive response. I'm going to now turn back to Dr. Jha. The question coming from many people is India. Is India ready for IIoT? Now, while this is not the subject matter for today's session, but all the same, if you can tell them what the foundation is doing and how companies who already have people skilled with PLC knowledge and IT skills, how can they gain? And is there anything else you'd like to recommend to them in terms of skilling?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I'm very excited to see the result that is coming out of the poll. I think with this kind of a statistics, no one can stop us in adopting the smart manufacturing. It's a wonderful that if we have the capability of around 86-87% of people aware of the basic core technologies, I think we are almost ready to do experiment with these technologies. I think Mr. Jirge has explained a very nice level-based approach wherever you are right now and from where how we can move up in the ladder. Certainly, with the prerequisite is already with you now because if you have those kind of engineers understanding the PLC programming sensors and able to do experiment with IT also because that's what the majority says. I think with a little bit upskilling and understanding the implementation part, I think you are almost ready to do an experiment with this and take into the implementation. Because the way Mr. Jirge has shown about the sensor integration, collecting the data, take it to the server, and then analyze that data. I think all kind of solutions and services are possible once you have that kind of a data available. Once you integrate the sensor into the system. Certainly, the analyzing sensor data is little bit more time taking and requires a domain understanding. But doing a very minimal experimentation where the thresholds can be monitored, where the trends can be monitored, where the alerts can be generated, these kind of things can be easily integrated. And what we are doing at the FSM is taking the skill level where you are right now from a PLC and IT understanding, how these technologies can be implemented. What kind of protocols, networks will be coming into picture, how you take the data into the server, how you will be analyzing, what kind of analytics are available, what are tools are available, and then what kind of results should be required by the user, how to represent that data also. So data visualization is there, how to implement very minimal kind of learning also. Machine learning can also be done onto that data, how you build models for monitoring the machine health. So with a minimal level you already have, I think the upgradation can be much easier. So what we will be even planning that in the coming days, we will be trying to have more programs which are focused on learning about implementation of these technologies. So those who are already ready, those who are already familiar with these basic learnings, they are most welcome to join and then upgrade themselves to do more experiment with these technologies. So what do you, Anupji?
Thank you, Dr. Jha. May I request the audience to hold on for the last part, which is to answer your questions. So we have some questions and I'm going to bunch them and ask our speakers. So Dr. Date, the question is coming to you from Mr. Chandramouli, who's from Bangalore. And there is another question coming from Suyash. So I'm going to combine this. Mr. Chandramouli is saying it's evident that multi-skilling and upskilling becomes urgent and important. What are the suggested strategies to achieve this in the engineering industry, and how to cope with the consequent unemployment? Suyash is asking, can we achieve 100% productivity with 100% automation? And related to the people, his question is it ethical to reduce manpower at this point of time of global COVID pandemic? Many questions, but I thought I'll bunch it so that you can answer all of them. Dr. Date.
Okay. Absolutely, very, very good questions. I mean, essentially, world over, this question has been on the top of people's mind, both in terms of the economics of automation and ethics of automation from the point of view of finally it touches the people's jobs, and more so in India because I think India always has had this large amount of unemployment historically, of course, over a period of time. On one hand, there is an unemployment for unskilled people. On the other hand, you just cannot get people with the right skills. So we have got dichotomy as well in terms of where we are at in terms of the people's skills. But nonetheless, I think in the realm of automation, this question is often asked. And, for this, there are actually very, very prominent studies around the world that automation is has an interesting profile. That, in the initial days, where the jobs are taken away, there is a small dip in terms of the job profiles, but as a result of the efficiencies that it creates, and therefore effectively the this business growth that it achieves, it essentially generates much economic growth, resulting in more employment. As a matter of fact, studies after studies show that the employment of or the use of robots and automation, that percent actually is positively correlated with employment growth, not negatively correlated as one would expect. So it is kind of counterintuitive, but the simplest analogy that I will provide you is that essentially one time when a car or a automobile came together as a means of automating the transport of people, right? And essentially the same job that would have earlier been done by hundreds of people pulling carts or drawing horse carriages or whatever, now can be done by one truck, for example. And there is indeed a lot of employment in that sense. But look at where it took the economics, and in terms of the economic development and technological development of the world, in terms of creating those jobs. So essentially, I think if you keep on looking at the limited sense of this job got taken away by the robot, as opposed to the efficiencies that it achieved, and therefore the competitiveness it achieved, and therefore affordability it achieved for people to afford it, the quality that it achieved from the point of view of it not failing and therefore delivering higher economic return and so on, then essentially the studies after studies have shown that it is good for humans, good for the world.
Okay, I think
Dr. Date, you forgot your famous safety issue. You are very prominently promoting safety. So automation also drives safety.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out. Of course, I should have probably started with it. But since the I guess question was more targeted from jobs creation, essentially
yes.
Job creation, that actually use of automation will grow the industry and actually create more jobs. As a matter of fact, look at essentially if you look at the Chinese profile, right, the use of automation is highest in the world right now. I mean, the growth of robot use in China is at least 3 times even its European and American peers, which are supposed to have been the fastest implementers of robotic technology just because of the local lower labor costs and so on, right? But if you look at the job the automation growth in China, they are growing hand in hand. Net, China is not reducing jobs; they are actually increasing jobs, right? So I think that's a very, very clear example of what we have been saying, that automation, because of the efficiencies that it drives, actually makes you more competitive, and therefore increases your employment opportunities.
Yes. And I think, as an ecosystem builder, the associations and the foundations, like the Foundation for Smart Manufacturing, they all are entrusted with taking steps to reskill and upskill. So that is something which is ongoing. I'll move to a very specific technical question asked from Hari for Mr. Jirge on your presentation. He's saying, do we need this IO card? I presume he's talking about the IO Link Master for pulling data for analysis. Typically, we connect PLC to an edge server, which again connects to an IoT platform for analytics.
Absolutely, you can do that. Absolutely no problem. There are both the possibilities. You can take a simple analog sensor, connect it to the PLC, and from the PLC you can take to the edge server. But in nowadays, there are more and more cases coming where you want to just do the monitoring part of it. You don't need to do any controlling part of it. So technically speaking, you don't need a PLC, for example, but you need to monitor. In that case, if you connect an IO-Link sensor to this IO-Link master, even without the PLC, you can take the data to the server and do analytics. So it saves huge amount of costs actually. So through the PLC you can do that, but there is a way to do without PLC also. If you don't need a PLC, only for the monitoring purpose. That's the thing. And second aspect is, nowadays, if there are 100 devices or 100 sensors on the machine, 10 years back, 90 sensors were used to actually run the machine and 10 sensors were used to monitor the parameters of the machine. Now that proportion is drastically changing. You have 40% or 40 sensors to actually run the machine and 60 sensors to monitor some parameters. Now, if you take the data of 100 sensors to the PLC, you are consuming capacity of the PLC also, and then take it to the edge server. We can do that. The alternative is, those 60 sensors which are used only for the monitoring, you need not take it to the PLC. Reduce the load on the PLC and the specification of the PLC. Let the PLC run the machine, and only for monitoring, take the data from those IO-Link sensors directly to the server. So you save a cost basically. It's a cost issue. Thank you.
Okay, now we come to the last question, that is for Dr. Jha. Question is from Abhay Kulkarni, and he says there is a huge cost pressure post-COVID scenario and limitation on capex. What will be the foundation's approach for delivering or suggesting solutions, keeping in balance the needs for basic sustenance as well as planning for volume growth?
So as I responded on Q&A also, the idea is that FSM give you a good platform to experiment with technology before you take them to the implementation. So idea is that FSM will give you those resources, learning, whatever in fact the hardware resources required to do an experimentation in the beginning phase. And once you are sure that this technology option is going to work for you, so you save a lot of expenditure on trying it out solutions. You will get a tested solutions, you will get a guidance, and you will get a training and learning in FSM, which will certainly reduce the cost of implementation. And we will be giving advice more on the lowest cost, best option possible for you.
Thank you, Dr. Jha. With that, we closing in. The next session is already up on your screen, 22nd May. You will get an invitation. You will also get to know the topics and the speakers. Once again, we will be bringing to you specific solutions for your need. With that, I'd like to thank our main speakers, Dr. Ranjit Date, Mr. Bipin Jirge, Dr. Sunil Jha. I'll also take this opportunity to thank our backend team, which is Naman Kapoor, Rajesh, Preeti, and we also have our designer, Ms. Jain, and none the least, Mr. Ravi Agarwal, the AIA president, who's been the vision behind this entire series. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to the wonderful audience. You're still there, and it's time for your tea break. All the best for the evening. Stay safe, stay happy. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.